as part of my program in Happy Gut, I take dairy out. And that's because, for people who have gut issues, anywhere between 70 and 90% of people across the world have lactose intolerance. Part of that is probably due to dysbiosis, so derangements, imbalances in their gut microbiome, so they can't digest lactose as well. Now, the caveats to that are also like knowing food sourcing, because when we're talking about dairy, are we talking about factory dairy or organic dairy? Are we talking about pasture-raised dairy that, so it's not the same thing. You can't compare them. Butter that comes from factory-raised cows is probably one of the most toxic things you could eat. But butter from pasture-raised cows can be great for you, or ghee, which is devoid of the dairy protein. So if you absolutely have issues with dairy proteins, food sensitivities, because a lot of people get confused. Lactose intolerance is not a sensitivity to dairy. They're not the same thing. One is an enzyme deficiency, so you can't break down the sugar and you get a lot of gas, bloating, and maybe diarrhea. And the other one leads to systemic effects because you're getting an IgG response. You're getting a blood antibody response to the dairy proteins, whether it's casein or whey. It gets more complicated than this because the majority of the cows in the US are what we call A1 cows. And it has to do where there's one amino acid mutation on that casein protein that makes it very difficult for our enzymes to cleave the protein. But if you go to New Zealand, the majority of the cows are A2 cows. And that one or two, all it means is that there is a difference in one amino acid. That one amino acid difference means that A2 milk is much easier to cleave that casein protein into smaller amino acid chains that do not cause an immune reaction, whereas A1 milk does. So, there's so many levels, and we can get to raw versus non-raw milk. And I'm a big fan of raw cheeses because it's still full of all the enzymes. And I think that as part of a program of rebuilding the gut, even though you might take dairy out, eventually there is a role for introducing fermented dairy in the form of kefir, maybe homemade kefir from organic milk, or maybe organic goat milk, less antigenic than dairy, or yogurt. So I think being black and white about this is wrong because there's a lot of nuances depending on the person. I'll give you an example, again, from my own experience. I went to Guatemala in January of 2021, got Giardia, probably from being in Lake Atitlan. And, while I was treating myself for it, I actually avoid dairy in the winter months because it creates more mucus and it'll make it easier for me to get sick. But for some reason, intuitively, my body was asking for kefir. And as I was healing my gut from the Giardia with bone broth, probiotics, all the things that I know to do, I started having a shot of kefir every day, and that made a huge difference.
Interesting. I had dairy as a big part of my diet for many, many years. And both consuming, yogurt and raw, I was generally consuming good quality raw milk and lots of whey protein, tons of whey protein supplements, and even casein protein supplements. And then at a certain point, I started to develop this weird symptom that took me months to figure out what was causing it. It felt like, that feeling you have on the first day you're catching a cold, where you have this kind of irritation in the back of the throat, something in your nose, and a little congestion. I felt like that every day for months. And I thought do I have a chronic sinus infection or something?
And that's a typical symptom of dairy sensitivity.
Yeah. So then I removed dairy and it went away within a couple of days. And after that point, I thought, I guess my body's reactive to dairy now. And so I removed dairy from my diet completely for like 2 or 3 years, and I just recently reintroduced it without any symptoms. I'm curious if you know sort of the mechanisms behind what could explain that, because I certainly don't.
One can be overexposure.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to food sensitivities, there's threshold issues. So it could be that you passed your threshold that then activated your immune system. There could have been other shifts going on in your gut microbiome at the time. Maybe your gut permeability was a little bit higher, and then it was just kind of smoldering the fire. You kept exposing yourself to whey, which is also can be kind of hard for the digestive system to break down. You know, again, without all those enzymes, you know, because raw milk has all the enzymes